everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 93 with Justin Nguyen. So this is a shorter but super fun and relevant episode, mostly focusing on maximizing LinkedIn, networking, and just really authentic career advice for students and higher ed professionals at large. Justin he's a fellow podcaster. It was really great to talk to. His show, Declassified College, kind of helps unlocking the cheat codes of, for students navigating college. So really great resource to share with students. So definitely go check it out, and very much appreciate Justin's time here. So after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 93 with Justin Nguyen. This episode is sponsored by Degree.me, a one-stop college research tool for students. If you work for a college or university, you'll want to learn all about their ability to connect you with the right students at a budget-friendly price. To find out more, please visit degree.me/HEG. Well, I appreciate you making time for the show here, Justin. Really excited to talk with you, and always nice to have a fellow podcaster on. So, I guess if you want to just kick us off, as we always do, if you want to just introduce yourself really quick and just give a brief overview of your professional journey so far and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, of course. So Justin Nguyen, I'm the founder of the Get Your Grind Up movement. And basically what we're trying to do with Get Your Grind Up is really share the cheat codes to success. So we have our own podcast called Declassified College, where we're sort of changing the game with podcasting a little bit, especially in the career space. We're moving away from long form interviews and more short form 5 to 10 minute podcast episodes that are really geared towards one specific topic. So those are sort of the two main things that I'm working on when it comes to like why I'm qualified to be talking about career stuff. I started creating content on LinkedIn when I was in college, and now I get about 200,000 views on my stuff every single month, and that's all geared towards career, how to find internships, etc. And then when I was in school, I actually got rejected from 50 plus internships, even with like a near 4.0 GPA and joining the clubs. And then I ended up graduating with 5 internship experiences. So I sort of mastered the way of learning the ins and outs of college. And I'm just here to sort of share all of that insights to any college students out there or any parents that are looking to share that insight to their students as well.
Yeah, very cool. So I guess, we can dig a little bit deeper. I mean, it's obviously especially relevant in this interview. And sometimes just like kind of from my higher ed perspective, it's like a kind of a curiosity to hear about people's, their own college experience. But it really was like a kind of a launching pad for you to, go through the experience of, figuring everything out and wanting to kind of be generous and not kind of like hog all of the kind of expertise that you developed and everything, and talk with great people to keep keep sharing that relevant information, help others. So I guess if you want to like dig into that a little bit deeper, like, it's like some of the struggles, I guess, in terms of like getting those internships, or just like, if you did sort of, unlock something at a certain point that allowed you to like get where you wanted to go. Just share a little bit more about your college experience and how that's still kind of resonating with you today and the work that you're doing with the podcast and everything.
Yeah, of course. So just a little bit like more background on sort of how I was brought up. Both of my parents are Vietnamese refugees. So I was sort of brought up very traditional of listen to your parents, what they say kind of goes. And what I was always told growing up was if you get good grades in school, you'll ultimately have a job. And I think a lot of people are told that. And as kids, we're told to like respect our parents. So we sort of believe that. So that's what I did. I went to college. I thought that having the 4.0, joining the student clubs, doing everything that I was quote unquote told to do to be successful. And then I kept on getting rejection letters. So I was like, why the heck am I struggling so hard to get an internship while the kid next to me has a 3.0 and he's interning at Goldman Sachs this summer? So I started to dive a little bit more, and I realized the reason that I wasn't getting even a chance to get these internships was my resume probably wasn't even getting read. And even though I was going to career services day after day, trying to get it critiqued the best way possible, the matter of the fact was I couldn't get a referral, or I didn't have someone to give me a referral. So once I learned that cheat code of if you get a referral, the chances of your resume actually getting seen just skyrocket. I think it's somewhere between like 50 or 60% chance that your resume gets seen with a referral. That's when I started to learn the game of networking and especially LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has been a huge platform for not just my career, but for numerous of others people that I've talked about when it comes to how to get those internships and job offers. So I guess we can kind of start there of LinkedIn. That's the platform you need to be on as a college student.
Yeah, I mean, I've found recently for sure that uh, it just like content that I'm creating, and it's certainly I guess more professionally minded for other hired professionals, primarily like you know. That it just gains so much more traction. I mean, there's so much noise in social media, in general. So I think I don't know. I think yeah, people like kind of like overlook LinkedIn, but it's really positioned itself if you use it in a really purposeful, like forward-thinking way. You can really build your network and form really good connections and yeah, internship opportunities. So I think certainly good to for any higher ed professional out there, like trying to help kind of model the way or be knowledgeable about it so they can support your students with it. So um, yeah, I mean, I guess with that, I mean that obviously is like you said, like a huge part of your college experience. Like, did you have to kind of figure it out on your own? And I guess kind of speaking to that, and maybe like an anecdote of like a meaningful connection that you got from it, of just sort of how that kind of came to be.
Yeah, so it was kind of crazy how LinkedIn all sort of started. I think many students when they're in college, they're told you need to be on LinkedIn. This is a great platform, but not many people actually go out of their way to explain how to use it. And that's sort of the differentiating. The same way with networking, right? Everyone says you need to network, but not many people tell you how to actually network. So
Mhm.
with LinkedIn, I was essentially on my own. I knew I needed to be on there, but I was just testing things here and there. And I didn't even know that content was even on the platform. I just thought it was a professional Facebook because that's what everyone always said. So I got onto the platform, noticed that people were creating videos and writing content, and I started to pay attention to it. And I tested some things, and I was getting like 1 or 2 likes or something like that, and it was terrible. And then all of a sudden, I saw that people would tag these quote unquote influencers on the platform, and those posts tended to do really well. So I started to reach out to quote unquote influencers on LinkedIn, the Quentin alums of the world, the Shea Rowbottoms, etc. And I would hop on phone calls with them and just try to understand what they were doing differently compared to me and get their tips and tricks. And then I saw a post that went viral about how people hated the spam sales messages on LinkedIn. And I created a piece of content around there and I tagged a bunch of influencers at the bottom. And at this point, I maybe had like 200 or 300 connections. And that post went viral for me. I remember I was sitting in my economics class right next to my friend and it got 10,000 views, then 20,000. Then the next 30 minutes passed by and it's at like 40,000. I'm like, what the heck is even going on right
Mhm.
now? And I'm like tapping my friend on the shoulder and we're just so confused. So that's what really got me into the content creation space on LinkedIn. And I haven't really left it since. And it's been fun to really get to know people and interact. And you don't necessarily need to go viral to build up a large network. I actually tell students that the content that you create is super important when you're reaching out to individuals that of like jobs that you want to get into, because you can use that content to showcase your skills that you actually have compared to just a resume, which a lot of people lie on. But if you have tangible like if you have tangible assets to show and you create that content on LinkedIn and it gets in front of the right person, that's sort of your credibility. And that takes a lot of risk away from the recruiter, the hiring manager, or whoever may be that's looking at your stuff.
Well, even then too, I mean, just obviously like with any social media, like just that opportunity to like, you see something somebody else posts, you're commenting, you're sort of like, and just like that engagement part of it too, I feel like is so valuable. But yeah, you're kind of like showing your work and, featuring yourself a little bit more dynamically than, just your resume or, which essentially your LinkedIn page is your resume, but then you can get, endorsements and recommendations on there, so there's so many features on there that I think can be so valuable and allow yourself to be able to be featured in a more deep and dynamic way than just your typical kind of templated resume. So
Yeah, I mean, because like I think LinkedIn's a perfect platform. Again, I'll speak from like the student perspective, because let's say someone wanted to work at Microsoft, right? And then they found someone that worked as a software engineer at Microsoft and then cyber stalked them all the way to following them on Instagram. That would be really weird, right? Um,
mhm.
and if you try to send that person a DM, they probably would be like, "Why the heck is this 18-year-old college kid messaging me?" But if you do that same thing on LinkedIn, it's sort of acceptable. And it's because it's on this professional platform that if you created a piece of content, let's say, again, the software engineering route where you coded a video game, very basic video game, and you posted that out so that people can see, people are actually going to see it because that post on Instagram can't compete with the Instagram models, the Mr. Beast, the Gary V's, etc. of Instagram. But on LinkedIn, you can compete pretty well because the content on that platform is already professional. There's not really a Gary V. I mean, obviously Gary V is on the platform, but he's not producing as much content as compared to on Instagram and everything like that. So there's a lot less competition for your stuff to actually get seen.
Yeah, it is just interesting. Yeah, I mean, and I even use it like because I think you're trying to network with somebody. It's like that is nowadays kind of like the modern Rolodex. You're connecting with
Mm-hmm.
somebody. You can see like, oh yeah, you've worked at like all these different companies for this long, and this is the degree that you got, and other like 'cause obviously it integrates with so many other like digital education platforms to show other like certificates that you've gotten. So, you can really see firsthand, like, okay, these are the things that you've done to get where you are. And then, you send them a message to perhaps, follow up, and you can just ask more sort of personalized or in-depth questions versus like, where did you work before this? It's like, I already have all the information. So let's get like, into the weeds here. So valuable. And I think, such good advice for students and professionals. It's just for anybody really, obviously it's not, uh, irrelevant to any working professional. It is a great platform to invest in. I think since I've pushed out content more readily there, I've seen it get quite a bit more traction. So I don't know what they've done with their algorithms lately, but it is working and very, very, very much appreciated. So I guess like kind of final note on that, I guess like just what's been like, I guess most enjoyable, like you've obviously just kind of hit on something here to, be creating content or just engaging on LinkedIn, more readily. So I don't know if it's something that you have done before in different ways of like creating original stuff and anything like that. I guess just like, is it like sort of striking on a creative itch or something like that of just like what's been really enjoyable just about this since you've kind of been going all in on it a lot recently?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most enjoyable thing for me has been just getting the feedback from students of like, oh my God, this helped me so much. Or people, especially with the podcast, are like, man, I wish I listened to this earlier, or I wish I had this earlier on in my college career. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to target more freshmen and sophomores. But that's sort of the beauty of creating content, because if I never put that out there, no one would have ever heard that, and no one would have ever been able to tell me that. And I think that's sort of the most important thing to me, of being able to actually see the results that I'm putting out there, like people commenting on my posts, people sending me DMs. That's what is so great about content creation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like it's one of those things that I think sometimes people are like demotivated to like even try to like put stuff out there. And sometimes, I mean, you don't always have to like create something original if you're just resharing, an article with commentary or just, relevant information for, again, you keep using the example, I guess, just to keep with the consistent metaphor or whatever, software engineering, if you're sort of like helping to kind of, share out relevant information, you don't have to be like, well, like, I got to, code something unique or create something new, or write something on my blog. It's just like, no, I mean, there's just a value in sort of like keeping your page active, showing that you are keeping up with current events and those sort of things. But, and then it's just, there's a beauty in sort of being on these platforms and active, like there's kind of room for many people to be at the table and having these conversations and putting out content versus I don't know, thinking that's like, well, people are already doing this, so why should I do it or something? You can really like, get yourself out there and distinguish yourself in the way that you want, like whatever the way that is. So, and it's always just great to hear. Yeah, great to hear from the audience too.
Definitely. I mean, I would just add like one little thing to that point, right? A lot of people think, "Oh my God, I'm creating content. Who's going to see it?" There's so many people out there creating content, right? But especially on LinkedIn, I believe the stat a year ago, so maybe it's gone up a little bit. But how much percent do you think, out of all of like 700 million users of LinkedIn, what percentage do you think create content on a monthly basis?
I'll just go with like 25%, maybe like a quarter of people.
1%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So like it seems like people are creating content because if you think about it, like, right, you're just scrolling down and you're just seeing post after post after post. But when you actually dig into it, there's not that many people creating content. So that's why there's still that ability to be seen on that platform. And then out of that 1%, only about 1% create video content. So that's why if you can figure out a way to leverage content, again, it doesn't have to be anything amazing, but just putting it out there and then being able to tag people that are in hiring positions or sending it in via DMs to someone who is in a hiring position and say, hey, I worked on this software, I worked on this coding project. I would love for you to see it and give me any feedback that you have. I'm looking to work with Netflix later on in my career and would love to just learn what I can do now to position myself better. Like you can do that on LinkedIn, but that's something that a lot of people won't tell you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's good framing. Yeah. I mean, just encouraging people to put themselves out there. It's like, you are already setting yourself apart from like the vast majority of people who do nothing on LinkedIn. Um, then yeah, I mean, if you're doing videos, because I know for me, like, there's certain tools, and this kind of gets segues to a little bit of my next question of like, there's like for my podcast, you can like create basically like a video audio clip of your podcast, and it has like the waveforms, and it's just like you're sort of teasing out a piece of the podcast through that, but that is featured through the social media platforms as a video. So it's just like going to hit on something different than, my typical posts that are just like sharing out an article or a picture or something. So, you're kind of diversifying there, which is sort of getting a little bit next level, maybe for some people who aren't even active on the platforms at all. It's like certainly just trying to start getting active, and then like you can kind of start building upon it with even, different sort of, mediums. But so I guess with stuff like that, I guess like with your podcast and just like creating content and putting yourself out there, like what are things that you are geeking out about, if it is tools, platforms, or just hobbies or anything like that? Like yeah, like what's grabbing your attention lately?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're hyper focused on how can we scale our podcast growth, because I'm sure like having a podcast, it's really tough to get seen because there's no real algorithm behind it, right? You have a few top
Mhm.
charts, but other than that, there's no real recommendation side. Apple has a little bit of it, but it's kind of tucked at the bottom of the playlist and everything. So we've been trying to see how can we leverage other platforms, and obviously LinkedIn has been the base of everything, but we're looking to expand into other ones. So right now we're looking into possibly going into YouTube as well as TikTok. TikTok is the most viral platform that there is right now. The algorithm is amazing, but it's just figuring out how do we make career education quote unquote sexy to compete with everything else that's on TikTok. So that's what we're going through right now, and we're still in sort of that ideation phase. But who knows? Maybe you'll see Declassified College on TikTok soon.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and that's almost like the idea of like geeking out about something like a fun challenge like that, kind of just like putting yourself to task of just like, yeah, how can we like figure that out? Because I think people are, yeah, they're playing with it to, not just have it. I think everything is done in that, sort of fun and very engaging way, but like it can be educational. It can be, I don't know, just having other expressed purposes than just fun for its own sake, which is fine. But it is, I think, starting to sort of change in that way where I'm not on the platform a lot. My wife loves it. So I'm like curious, like I'd be curious to see if, as more people use it and more people create content on it, like the different, I don't know, different avenues they go.
Yeah, it's a super unique platform, right? Because you only have up to a minute, but most videos are 7 to 15 seconds long. So it's how can you convey your message that's so long, especially at careers, right? But in a very bite-sized, content-oriented place. There's a few career content creators out there. Madeline Mann and JT O'Donnell are probably the two biggest ones on TikTok. I'm not sure if you've heard of them before, but they're probably the two ones that I've seen consistently pop up on that platform. But other than that, there's not much. So there's a space that needs to be filled, and I'm not sure who's going to fill it. Hopefully it's us. We'll see. But maybe you'll see Declassified College on your For You page soon. Who knows?
On that of like, you've kind of, I appreciate it, sort of name dropped a few people, I guess, you're watching and all that. So, anything else, just, I mean, like resources in general, or like the stuff that you're consuming, anything that you are reading, watching, listening to that you'd want to kind of give a tip of the hat to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting podcast that I've listened to is Business Wars. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
basic. So it's like it's so interesting to me because they're the stories that you've never really dove into, right? You know that Nike fought Adidas, but you don't really know the stories of how the strategy and the business strategy sort of played out. So I've been really paying attention to that, trying to see how Mr. Beast is continuing to always go viral is super important to me because he's gone about it in a way that most people haven't in the past. Most of the times, the individuals that consistently go viral, it's because of drama or being very controversial. His is all very goody, like good story type of stuff, which isn't necessarily always going viral. So that's been super interesting for me to watch and see how can I take what he's done and put it into some of our content that we're doing too. But other than that, I mean, on the non-businessy space, been loving playing Xbox lately. It's been such a great release, especially with working from home. It's very hard to sort of differentiate when to work and when not to work, and turning on the
Mm-hmm.
Xbox is a great way to sort of release everything and not have to worry about business or the podcast or anything like that. So that's been my main source of getting away from just working.
Yeah, yeah, and I in a recent episode, I just actually recorded on the same day as this one, but anybody listening in order, it'll probably come out like a week ago. So time is weird, but we were talking about kind of escaping into like dystopic stuff because like I have Last of Us Part Two, a video game like
Mm.
waiting for me, and because like been a video gamer my entire life, and that I'm like excited to escape into this dystopic video game or whatever. It's just like it's just so weird. Like it's actually not that much of an escape because like everything's so chaotic right now. But yeah, it's obviously. I mean, it's such a great release, and thankfully, I mean, all things considered, I've had more time recently to play video games because I'm not like, traveling for this, that, or the other thing or whatever. I can just like, all right, let me close my computer down. I'm going to hop on, my PS4 and do whatever. So, um, yeah, it's good stuff. Well, then, as we kind of wrap up the episode, I always like to end things on an optimistic note. So if you want to just share anything, and if you want to hit on all the categories of like some things that you're looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm looking for later this year is really seeing how can we scale the podcast. I'm trying to take it more from a startup perspective and less from being a podcast perspective. And when I'm looking at that, it's like month over month growth. How are we going to do all of that? So that's like business wise. That's what I'm looking forward to. When it comes to anything not business wise, I'm looking forward to traveling, hopefully opening up by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Because last year I got to go to Japan and Dubai, and it was absolutely amazing. And I was looking to kind of continue that streak this year, but COVID happened, and who knows when things will open up. Especially, I'm in Florida, so we're sort of the new epicenter of cases, and thankfully deaths are down. But who knows what the future will lie? So we'll see. Hopefully, that trend continues by the time this episode releases.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean that's the idea for me too, is like trying to kind of just grab on to any of the silver linings where it's like, oh, okay, like, there's just the chaos with everything going on with the pandemic in this country, especially like, but yeah, maybe like the positivity rate is going down, even though we're still getting new cases, or like, these things where it's just trying to not kind of drown under the dread of this sort of just, indefinite kind of quarantine and everything. So yeah, and I feel like because a lot of people will say it's like, oh man, like when everything kind of quote unquote gets back to normal, which I'm sure things will get very close to normal, but not entirely. But like that for travel, especially, like, man, are people just going to go wild? Like they're just, they're biding their energy and their money and their time. Like, people are just going to be going all over the place or something. So I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I look forward to that as well. I mean, just within the past few years, it's been, a great experience. And like, I'm just getting like the itch to like go out to more conferences and, take trips with my wife or, visit friends and family and all that. So don't want to, entirely lose that momentum. Cause I know just for that idea, it's probably the heaviest lift of the efforts that anyone can take for like networking and that sort of thing. And for me, like growing the podcast or whatever, but like, I've been excited to try to get out to more conferences to build my network and all those sort of things. So I do look forward to being able to do it in person, since I work remotely anyway. So it's like, we're like, oh, you could just do the conference virtually. So it's like, no, I'd like to travel for it. I want to get out of, my sort of routine and not just be like, oh, I'm technically at a conference. I'm still sitting at my desk, So for me, the most valuable part is meeting people in person.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not the same, right? Conferences over virtual are just weird. Uh, it's sort of like a podcast, but at least a podcast, that you're having a conversation with the other person, and then it sort of ends after that conversation, and obviously you'll talk through email and for us Slack and stuff. But with networking events, it's so weird because you're there to hear someone talk, but they can't really see your reaction, so they can't necessarily change how they're talking to how you're reacting, which a lot of the best speakers do. And then from the networking aspect, you can't really do the same either. It's this super weird sort of forced environment because you have to go into these little side rooms to do your networking, and it's not the same as just meeting someone who just happens to be sitting at the coffee shop grabbing a cup of coffee that's just standing in line with you. So from the conference side, I'm super excited for whenever it does open back up. Who knows when that will be, but man, it's gonna be a journey, and this will be definitely a time to remember for the rest of our lives.
That's for sure. Yeah. And I guess it's the two sides of the coin. It can either sort of bemoan where we are now, or just kind of look forward to where we can be and the potential and all that. Cause I think, I don't know, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of good positive changes from all this, and the fact that this too shall pass eventually, and just looking forward to whenever that might be, and looking forward to being together in community with people in person in the near future. So I think that is a good place to wrap things up, and we'll have ways to connect with you and things that we mentioned in the show notes. But thank you so much for hanging out and just chatting about this. I feel like it's just such a good kind of focused and simple way to help encourage higher ed professionals to help themselves and help their students to distinguish themselves professionally. So I appreciate you sharing your story, and just thanks so much for your time.
No, thank you for having me, man. It was a pleasure. It's always great to be on the other side of the mic when it comes to podcasts and stuff. So it's always a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.